Four twin girls are kicked out of a rich classmate's birthday party. But when the girl's billionaire father discovers the real reason, he takes action that leaves everyone speechless. The bell rang, announcing the end of class. 23 5-year-olds rushed to the classroom door, eager to meet their parents waiting in the courtyard of the prestigious St. Michael's Academy. Only two remained seated, calmly organizing their matching, well-worn colored pencils, one set for each. Elise and Claire Parker looked so alike that even their teachers would mix them up. They both had brown hair cascading in soft curls over their shoulders, big attentive eyes, and a shy smile they showed only to their mother. They were the only students not wearing the complete school uniform, just the mandatory white shirt combined with simple skirts sewn at home. "Ready to go, girls?" Miss Ann Miller, their teacher, asked kindly. She had a special fondness for the twins. She knew they were on scholarship, and that their mother worked hard to keep them at the school. "Yes, Ms. Miller," they answered in unison, as they always did. As they walked through the school's gleaming hallway, they could see clusters of children who completely ignored them. It wasn't deliberate cruelty. At 5 years old, kids naturally flocked to others who looked and lived like them. And the Parker twins, with their simple outfits and basic lunches, did not resemble anyone else there. Out in the courtyard, Sophie Parker was already waiting for them. Unlike the other mothers who wore designer clothes and drove fancy cars, Sophie arrived on foot, always in the same faded blue coat and carrying a large bag filled with sewing scraps and small tailoring jobs she would work on while waiting. "Mommy!" The girls ran toward her, their faces instantly lighting up. Sophie knelt down and opened her arms to receive them. "How is your day, my little ones?" "Normal," answered Elise, the chattier of the two. Claire just shrugged, gripping the strap of her backpack a bit tighter. Normal for them meant spending the whole day being politely overlooked. They played together during recess, ate lunch together, and did all the activities as a pair. Not by choice, but because no one else invited them. On their way out, they passed a group of stylish mothers and their children. At the center stood Megan Edwards, the most popular girl in the class. The only child of Philip Edwards, owner of one of the largest tech companies in the country. Megan was always surrounded by friends and received invitations to all the parties. "Look who's leaving. Those weird twins," one child said, not exactly in a whisper. Sophie squeezed her daughter's hands and kept walking, pretending not to hear. She was used to it. When she secured the scholarship for the twins, she knew it would be tough but believed that the privileged education would be worth any sacrifice. "Don't pay attention to that," Sophie whispered. "Let's go home. I'll make hot chocolate today." Their small apartment was a 20-minute walk from the school. It was on the 3rd floor of an old building with no elevator, but it had large windows that let in plenty of light, essential for Sophie's work. In the 2-bedroom apartment, the living room had been turned into a small sewing workshop. A dress form stood in one corner, surrounded by carefully stacked fabrics, and the old sewing machine, an heirloom from Sophie's grandmother, took up most of the table by the window. While Sophie prepared the promised hot chocolate, the twins sat at the small kitchen table and took out the day's schoolwork from their backpacks. "Ms. Miller said my drawing was the best in class today," Claire mentioned, showing a colorful sketch. "It's beautiful, my treasure," Sophie said with a smile, pouring the chocolate into well-used but spotless mugs. "What about you, Elise?" "I got a star in math," she replied, proudly showing her notebook with a gold star in the corner of the page. "My little geniuses." Sophie kissed each one on the forehead. That was when she noticed a colorful envelope sticking out of Claire's backpack. "What's this?" Claire looked surprised, as if she had forgotten about it. "Oh." The teacher handed it out to everyone before we left. Elise quickly opened her backpack and took out an identical envelope. "It's an invitation." Sophie took one of the envelopes. It was made of expensive pearlescent paper, decorated with tiny sparkling crystals and gold lettering that read, "Megan Edwards invites you to her birthday party." Were we really invited to Megan's party? Sophie couldn't hide the surprise in her voice. The twins exchanged glances, a rare spark of hope lighting up their eyes. Megan had never spoken to them before, let alone invited them anywhere. "Do you think we can go, Mommy?" Elise asked in a near whisper, as though speaking louder might make the invitation vanish. Sophie opened the envelope and read the invitation. It was for the following Saturday, at the lavish Edwards Manor on the outskirts of town. The theme was fairy tale princesses, and children were asked to dress accordingly. Well, Sophie hesitated. Buying princess costumes was out of the question. It would cost almost a month's rent, and making something comparable to what the other children would wear would be difficult with the limited materials she had on hand. But then she saw the hope in her daughter's eyes. For the first time, they wouldn't be left out. Maybe this was the start of something new. Friendships, acceptance, a chance to belong. Of course you can go, she finally decided. I'll make the most beautiful dresses you've ever seen. The twins squealed with delight and jumped from their chairs, hugging their mother tightly. I want to be Belle, Elise exclaimed. I want to be Cinderella, said Claire at the same time. Sophie laughed. I'll start working on them tonight. That night, after the girls went to bed, Sophie stayed up late sketching dress designs. She planned to use the best scraps she had saved, leftovers from wealthier clients' sewing projects. She had some sequins and satin ribbons stored away that could add a special touch. In the following days, Sophie worked tirelessly. During the day, she handled her regular sewing tasks, alterations, small repairs, and the occasional new garment for loyal clients. At night, she devoted herself to the girls' dresses, sewing until her fingers ached. The twins noticed a change in how their classmates behaved almost immediately after the invitations were handed out. Suddenly, some children started talking to them during recess, asking if they too were going to the party. Are you really going? Abby, one of Megan's closest friends, asked with barely disguised disbelief. Yes, Elise answered with a shy smile. Our mom is making our dresses. Oh. Abby's tone clearly showed what she thought about homemade dresses. I'm wearing a dress my mom bought in New York. It's just like the one Princess Charlotte wore. Claire squeezed her sister's hand tightly. It didn't matter what Abby thought. They had been invited, and that was all that mattered. On Friday, the day before the party, Sophie finally finished the dresses. They weren't as extravagant as the ones the other girls would probably wear, but they were pretty and made with love. For Elise, a yellow dress with gold details inspired by Belle, adorned with small hand-sewn fabric roses on the skirt. For Claire, a light blue dress with a shimmering overlay reminiscent of Cinderella, decorated with tiny silver stars. Come see, Sophie called to the girls, who were doing their homework in the kitchen. The twins ran into the living area and stopped, mouths agape, at the sight of the dresses displayed on two small dress forms Sophie used for work. Are these for us? Claire asked, stepping carefully toward the blue dress. Yes, my darling. Try them on. The girls put on the dresses carefully, as though they were made of glass. When Sophie finished buttoning each one in the back, she guided them to the full-length mirror she used for client fittings. The reflection showed two real princesses, their eyes shining with excitement. We look beautiful, Mommy, Elise exclaimed, twirling to see the yellow skirt flare out like a flower. Yes, you do. Sophie felt her eyes water. Her daughters deserved so much more than the difficult life they led. They deserved to be accepted, to have friends, to go to parties like any other child. Tomorrow you'll be the prettiest princesses at the party. The big day arrived. Sophie woke up early to prepare everything. She styled the girls' hair in elaborate ways, interlaced braids with ribbons for Claire, and a low bun adorned with small fabric flowers for Elise. She applied very light makeup, just a bit of gloss and a little blush for color. The present, Elise suddenly remembered. We need to bring a gift for Megan. Sophie had already thought of that. With the little money she managed to save, she bought an illustrated storybook. It wasn't the most expensive one in the store, but it had beautiful images and classic tales any child would love. Here it is, she said, showing them the package wrapped in colorful paper and a handmade bow. You can give it to her together. Edwards Manor was a 30-minute bus ride away. Sophie couldn't afford a taxi, and taking the bus with two little princesses would be an adventure in itself. People on the bus smiled at the sight of the twins in their princess dresses. An elderly lady even commented on how adorable they looked, making the girls blush with delight. When they finally arrived at the gates of the imposing property, the reality of the social gap between them and the other guests became even more apparent. Luxury cars came and went, dropping off children dressed as if they had come straight out of a Disney production, accompanied by elegantly dressed parents or nannies. "Come on, girls." Sophie adjusted the ribbons on their dresses one last time and held their hands. At the entrance, a man in a suit was checking invitations. "Names, please." "Elise and Claire Parker," Sophie answered. The man glanced at a list. "Ah, yes, the Parker twins." There was something odd in his tone, but Sophie ignored it. "You may go in. Mum, you can drop them off and return to pick them up at 6 p.m. Sophie hesitated. The other mothers seemed to be entering the party as well. "The invited adults are in the West Wing," the man explained, noticing her confusion. "The children's party is in the East Wing." I wasn't invited," Sophie admitted quietly, so the girls wouldn't hear. "I just came to drop them off." "I understand," he nodded. "Then please come back at 6 p.m. Sophie knelt to look her daughters in the eye. "Mommy has to go now." "You're going to have fun, and I'll be back to pick you up at 6, all right?" "You're not staying?" Claire asked, a note of anxiety in her voice. "It's a children's party, sweetheart. I'll come back soon. Behave and be kind to everyone." With one last hug, Sophie left the girls in the care of one of the party organizers who would guide them to the ballroom. Walking down the long corridor decorated with balloons and streamers, Elise and Claire held hands tightly. They were nervous but also excited. For the first time, they were going to be part of something special. The ballroom was dazzling. Decorated like a real fairy tale castle, it had a golden throne on a central stage, tables draped in fine linens, fresh flower arrangements everywhere, and even a chocolate fountain. Dozens of children were already playing, running around and chatting, all dressed as fairy tale characters. As soon as the twins entered, however, they sensed something strange. Several children stopped what they were doing and looked at them. These were not looks of welcome, but of surprise and confusion. "They're the weird twins," whispered a girl dressed as Snow White, not very discreetly. "What are they doing here?" asked another. Elise and Claire timidly moved to a corner of the room, still holding hands. Their dresses, which had looked so lovely at home, now seemed too simple compared to the professional costumes the other children wore. Some mothers, who were there despite the party being just for kids, watched the twins with expressions ranging from pity to discomfort. "Who are those girls?" one mother asked another. "They're the scholarship kids in Megan's class." No idea why they were invited. Elise and Claire, despite their age, understood the tone of the remarks. Instinctively, they huddled closer together, creating their own tiny island of security amidst a sea of strange looks. "Maybe we should give her the present," Claire suggested in almost a whisper. Elise nodded, holding onto the package as if it were a shield. Maybe when they gave Megan her gift, she would notice them and introduce them to the others. Maybe everything would improve. But as they searched for the birthday girl, a group of girls approached them. In the middle stood Megan Edwards, dressed as a stunning sleeping beauty. Megan stopped in front of the twins, her Aurora costume glittering under the ballroom lights. Elise and Claire clutched the gift in trembling hands, shy smiles on their faces. "You actually came," Megan said, her 5-year-old voice carrying an odd tone. Elise held out the package. "Happy birthday, Megan." Megan didn't take the present. Behind her, Abby and other girls whispered and giggled. The room grew quieter as more children gathered around. "Why are you wearing those dresses?" Megan asked, pointing to the twins' clothes. "Our mom made them," Claire answered softly. "She's a seamstress." Abby stepped forward. "They look like old curtains," she teased, provoking laughter. The twins' cheeks burned with embarrassment. The circle of children around them grew quickly. "You shouldn't be here," Megan declared, folding her arms. "This party is for my friends." "But we got invitations," Elise protested, pulling the envelope from her pocket. Megan snatched the invitation from her hand. "My mum said I had to invite everyone in class, Bo, but she didn't know that included you." "You're on scholarship," Abby added. "You shouldn't even be at our school." The children started pointing. One of the mothers approached, more out of curiosity than concern. "What's going on, sweetie?" she asked Megan. They weren't really invited, Megan replied. They're the poor girls in my class. The woman looked at the twins with discomfort. She did nothing to help them, simply turning to speak with another mother. Look at their shoes, shouted a boy dressed as a prince. Claire lowered her gaze to her worn-out shoes, tears beginning to form. And those hairstyles, commented another girl. They look like they did them themselves. Elise dropped the gift, which fell to the floor. Megan picked it up and tore off the wrapping without care. A book. What a boring present, she declared, tossing it back onto the floor. One of the girls stepped on its pages on purpose, crumpling them. The other children laughed even louder. Trash princesses, someone shouted. Your dresses look like rags, shouted another. Claire was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face. Elise tried to stay strong, but her lips trembled so badly she could barely speak. A party staff member finally approached, drawn by the commotion. What's going on here? She asked. They're not supposed to be at my party, Megan explained. I want them out. The woman looked at the crying twins, then at the group of children laughing, and finally at the mothers, who simply watched without intervening. Come with me, girls, she said, taking them by the hands. We'll figure this out. As they were led out of the ballroom, the laughter and insults continued. Some kids even left their seats to follow the little group down the corridor, pointing and jeering. Go back to your poor neighborhood. Fake princesses. We don't want you here. At the reception area, the staff member called security. Pierre, I need you to escort these girls out, she instructed. Apparently, there was a misunderstanding with their invitation. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Elise insisted, tears finally spilling from her eyes. The teacher gave invitations to everyone. The staff member sighed. I'll call your mother. What's her number? Between sobs, Claire recited the phone number. The woman made the call quickly, choosing her words carefully. There's been a problem at the party. The girls are upset. It would be best if you could come pick them up. The security guard looked at the twins with pity. Let's wait outside, he said kindly. At that moment, more children appeared in the corridor, pointing and laughing. Megan was among them, her glittering dress a stark contrast to the twins' red, tear-streaked faces. Get them out of here, Megan ordered like a little queen. They're ruining my party. The guard cast a disapproving look at Megan but said nothing. Instead, he held out his hands to the twins. Let's go outside where it's quieter, he suggested. Elise and Claire, still holding hands, followed him in silence. They just wanted their mother. They just wanted to go home and forget all this. On the way to the front garden, they passed more party guests who had come out to watch the expulsion. It was like a small crowd following condemned criminals to the gallows. That's why people like you shouldn't try to be like us, said an older girl as they passed by. You'll never make it. The security guard quickened his pace. Don't listen to them, he muttered. When they finally reached the garden by the entrance, he led them to a bench away from the main door. You can wait for your mum here, he said. I'll stay with you. The twins sat in silence, their small hands still clasped together as if they only had each other in the entire world. Claire sobbed softly, while Elise stared at her shoes, letting her tears fall freely now. Why do they hate us? Claire asked after a few minutes. The guard knelt in front of them. They don't hate you. They just don't know how to be kind yet. Are our dresses really that ugly? Elise asked, gazing at the yellow dress her mother had chosen with so much care. No, the man assured her. Your dresses are lovely, very lovely. But even his kind words couldn't counter the humiliation they felt. At 5 years old, they had just learned a cruel lesson about how the world saw people like them. After what felt like an eternity, but was only about 15 minutes, Sophie arrived, rushing over. As soon as they saw their mother, the twins jumped from the bench and ran into her arms, breaking into fresh tears. What happened? Sophie asked, kneeling to embrace them. They laughed at us, Claire sobbed. They said we didn't belong here, Elise added. Sophie looked at the security guard, who approached with a solemn expression. There was an incident at the party, he explained. The girls weren't treated kindly. Sophie understood instantly. Her face showed a mix of pain and anger. She hugged her daughters tighter. Let's go home, she said softly. As they left along the stone pathway, the twins took one last look at the imposing mansion, where they had dreamt of being princesses for a day. The colorful lights still glowed in the windows, the music still played, and the laughter of the other children still echoed in the air. Their pretty dresses, made with so much love, now felt unbearably heavy. The magic was gone, leaving only harsh reality. "I never want to be a princess again," Claire murmured to her sister. "Me neither," Elise agreed. Sophie overheard their brief exchange, and her heart broke into 1,000 pieces. What kind of world teaches such young children to despise others over money? What kind of society allows cruelty to be normalized like that? Waiting at the bus stop, the three remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The twins, so young, had just received a lesson many adults never need to learn. Some doors simply don't open for people like them, no matter how hard they try. Philip Edwards parked his Bentley at the entrance of Edwards Manor. He was late for his daughter's birthday party due to a business meeting he couldn't reschedule. Work always came first. That's how he had built his empire. Entering the grand hall, he sensed something off. The staff seemed tense, exchanging nervous glances when they saw him. Marie, the event planner, approached with a forced smile. "Mr. Edwards, so glad you could make it. The party is going very well." Philip looked around, suspicious. "Where's Megan?" "In the main ballroom with her guests," Marie replied quickly. "She's having a wonderful time." Philip nodded and walked down the hall. Something felt out of place. As he passed the security office, he saw Pierre, head of security, watching the surveillance monitors with a worried expression. "Is there a problem?" Philip asked, stopping in the doorway. Pierre startled. "No, sir, everything's under control." Philip entered the room and looked at the screens. "I want to see the recordings from the last 30 minutes. "Sir, I don't think—" "The recordings, Pierre, now." The security guard hesitated but obeyed. He typed a few commands into the computer, and the screens showed footage from the ballroom. Philip watched closely as the system replayed recent events. He saw his daughter at the center of a group, confronting two small girls in simple dresses. He turned up the volume and heard the cruel words, the laughter, the insults. He saw the twins being escorted out in tears and watched Megan and the other children mocking them to the very end. His face hardened. "Who are those girls?" Pierre swallowed hard. "They're the Parker twins, scholarship students in Megan's class. And where are they now?" "They left with their mother a few minutes ago." Philip stood silently, processing what he'd just seen. His own daughter had humiliated two children for being poor. Worse yet, it seemed orchestrated, from the invitations to the public humiliation. What happened to them? The security guard escorted them outside. Their mother came to pick them up. They were really upset. Shame and guilt washed over Philip. He didn't recognize the girl in the video. Could that truly be his daughter? Or had he just never noticed? The truth hit him like a punch. Maybe this was exactly the daughter he had raised. A spoiled, selfish child who'd never heard no, who always got what she wanted, who viewed people as inferior. "Where can I get their address?" he asked suddenly. Pierre opened a file. "Their mother's name is Sophie Parker. She lives in Brookside Heights. She's a seamstress." Philip nodded, committing the information to memory. Without another word, he left the security office, his normally calm face now set with determination. He strode quickly to the ballroom. The celebration continued as if nothing had happened. Children running around, parents chatting in small groups, music playing. In the center of it all, Megan laughed with her friends, her tiara shining under the lights. Philip headed straight for the stage where the band was performing. He signaled for them to stop and took the microphone. The music cut off abruptly, drawing everyone's attention. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice echoing through the ballroom. The guests turned around, surprised. Megan smiled when she saw her father, waving excitedly. "Thank you all for coming," Philip continued, "but before anything else, I need to address something that happened here today." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Megan stopped smiling, sensing something was wrong. "Not long ago, two little girls were humiliated and forced out of this party," he said. "Two 5-year-olds who received invitations, came in their nicest clothes, brought a present, and were treated like they didn't belong." Nervous murmurs spread through the crowd. Mothers glanced at each other uneasily. The children were confused. "I just watched the security footage," he went on, scanning the room with his gaze. "I saw my daughter, Megan, leading a cruel attack on two classmates whose only crime was coming from a family with less money." Megan's face paled. She had never seen her father so serious, so disappointed. "I also saw many of your children joining her, laughing and mocking, and adults, parents standing by, doing nothing to stop it." Philip paused, now looking directly at Megan. "My daughter, come here." Megan didn't move, frozen with fear. "Megan, come here now," Philip repeated, his voice firm. Reluctantly, she walked to the stage, climbing the small steps with her head down. Philip knelt to her eye level. "Do you know what you did wrong today?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Megan shook her head no, tears starting to form. "You humiliated two children who did nothing to you, two little girls who just wanted to be your friends. You teased them because they were poor, because they wore dresses their mom made." Tears streamed down Megan's cheeks now. "And the worst part? You planned it. You let them receive invitations knowing you'd embarrass them in front of everyone." Philip stood and spoke into the microphone again. "This shows that I have failed as a father, failed terribly. I raised a daughter who thinks she can treat people this way because of money." A few mothers began to gather their things discreetly, sensing the party was about to end on a very sour note. "The party is over," Philip announced. "I'm asking everyone to leave immediately." The guests looked at one another in shock. "This isn't a request," he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The party is finished. I want everyone out in 15 minutes. A murmur filled the ballroom as people started moving, grabbing coats and calling for their children. Philip turned back to Megan, who was openly sobbing by now. "As for you, young lady, we're going to have a long talk about respect and consequences." Megan looked at her father, her small face flushed and wet. "But, Dad, everyone does that to them at school." Philip felt another blow. The situation was worse than he'd imagined. "That's no excuse," he said firmly. "It's even worse. It means you're not only cruel, you're a follower, without the courage to do what's right." He took his daughter's hand and led her off the stage. Guests moved aside as they passed, some embarrassed, others outraged at the sudden end to the party. Stopping in the middle of the ballroom, still holding Megan's hand, Philip addressed the crowd one last time. "Before you leave, I want you to know something," he said loudly. "Tomorrow, I will personally visit those little girls home to apologize for what my daughter did and what all of you allowed." He looked directly at some parents he knew. "I suggest you do the same with your children. What happened today was unacceptable." A heavy silence fell over the group as Philip exited the ballroom with Megan, leaving behind a ruined party and dozens of guests in shock. In the corridor, away from prying eyes, Philip finally let go of his daughter's hand. "Go to your room," he ordered. "Stay there until I come up." Megan ran upstairs, still crying. Philip watched her disappear down the hall, his heart heavy with a mix of disappointment and determination. He had a lot of work to do to repair the damage he had done in raising his daughter, and the first step would be finding Elise and Claire Parker and their mother. Sunday dawned grey. Sophie woke up early and went straight to check on the girls. Elise and Claire were still asleep, curled up in the same bed as they always did when they felt sad or scared. Their faces, even in sleep, wore an expression of sorrow. Sophie sighed and gently closed the door. In the small kitchen, she prepared hot chocolate and sliced some bread for breakfast. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the events of the previous day, to the humiliation her daughters had suffered. Anger and helplessness formed a knot in her throat. When the twins finally woke up and shuffled into the kitchen, still in their pajamas with puffy eyes, Sophie tried to smile. "Good morning, my little ones," she said as cheerily as she could. "I made hot chocolate for you." The girls sat quietly at the table. Their usual energy, the chatter about dreams or plans for the day, was absent. "I know yesterday was hard," Sophie began, sitting with them, "but you're strong and smart girls. Tomorrow is a new day and—" "I don't want to go back to school," Claire interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. Elise nodded in agreement. "They'll all laugh at us." Sophie felt her heart tighten. Under normal circumstances, she would emphasize the importance of education and resilience. But now, looking at her daughter's downcast faces, she hesitated. "No one's going to laugh at you," she tried to assure them, not entirely convinced herself. "You didn't see how they looked at us," Elise said. "How they talked. Everyone at school is going to know what happened." "What if Megan tells everyone?" Claire asked, tears forming again. Sophie pulled their chairs closer and hugged them. "Listen, sweethearts, I know it hurts, I know it's hard. But we can't let people like Megan and her friends decide what you can or can't do." The twins remained silent, small tears rolling down their cheeks. Sophie knew that, as sincere as her words were, they couldn't erase the humiliation her daughters had experienced. "What if," Claire began softly, "what if we change schools?" The question took Sophie by surprise. Their scholarship at St. Michael's Academy was a rare opportunity, something she had fought hard for, which could give the girls a better future. "It's not that simple, my darling," she explained. "That school might open doors for you someday." "What doors?" Elise asked, unusually bitter for a 5-year-old. "We already saw that the party doors were closed to us." Sophie didn't know how to reply. How could she explain to a child the complexities of social mobility, of education as a tool for advancement, when all that child knew was the pain of rejection? The rest of the morning passed slowly. The twins stayed in the living room, drawing in silence, while Sophie worked on her sewing machine, trying to focus on alterations she needed to deliver on Monday. But her thoughts kept returning to the dilemma: force her children to face the hostile school environment or look for other options. The doorbell rang in the early afternoon, pulling her out of her thoughts. Sophie was puzzled. They rarely received visitors, especially on a Sunday. Opening the door, she froze in surprise. Standing there was Philip Edwards, the billionaire, Megan's father, dressed casually yet still far too elegant for her modest building. "Mrs. Parker?" he asked. "Sophie Parker?" Sophie nodded, momentarily speechless. "I'm Philip Edwards, Megan's father," he said, extending his hand. "May I speak with you?" Sophie hesitated before shaking his hand. "My daughters are very upset, Mr. Edwards. I don't know if a visit right now is—" "I completely understand," he interrupted gently. "But that's exactly why I'm here. I'd like to apologize in person for what happened yesterday." His sincerity made Sophie reconsider. After a moment, she opened the door a bit wider. "Please come in, but I must warn you, the girls are really shaken." Philip stepped into the small apartment, acutely aware of the contrast between his presence and the modest surroundings. The living area, also Sophie's sewing workshop, was neat and organized, but clearly belonged to someone with limited means. The twins looked up from their drawings when a stranger entered. They recognized him immediately from the occasional news articles or TV reports: Megan's father, the wealthy man who seemed to own half the city. "Hello," Philip said, kneeling to their level. "You must be Elise and Claire." The girls glanced at their mother, seeking guidance. "This is Mr. Edwards," Sophie explained. "He came to talk with us." "I came to apologize," Philip added, "for what my daughter did yesterday. It was unforgivable." The twins remained silent, watching him with a mix of distrust and curiosity. "Last night, after I found out what happened," Philip went on, "I ended the party. I sent everyone home and told them they should be ashamed of what they did." Sophie's eyes widened, surprised. "You ended your daughter's birthday party?" Philip nodded. "It was the right thing to do. What Megan did, what all those guests allowed to happen, was cruel and unfair. Megan said we didn't belong there," Elise ventured, always the braver one. "She was wrong," Philip replied firmly. "You had every right to be there. You were invited. And your dresses—" He glanced at the princess dresses hanging nearby. They were beautiful. "Your mom is very talented." Claire inched a bit closer, still wary. "The other kids laughed at us." "I know," Philip said, "and I made sure to talk to their parents afterward. What happened doesn't reflect who you are, but who they are." Sophie watched the interaction carefully. There was something genuine about how Philip spoke to the girls. No condescension, just honest respect for two little humans who had been wronged. "The girls are afraid of going back to school tomorrow," Sophie explained, taking a seat beside them. They think everyone will laugh at them. Philip considered for a moment. I understand their fear. In their shoes, I'd be scared too. He turned to Elise and Claire. But I promise I'll speak to the principal first thing tomorrow morning. I'll make sure no one laughs at you, and that Megan apologizes publicly. Elise and Claire exchanged skeptical looks. Even at 5 Eye, they knew the world didn't change that easily. Why are you doing this? Elise asked suddenly. The direct question took Philip by surprise. He paused before answering. Because I failed as a father, he finally admitted. I let my daughter become someone who hurts others, and when we do something wrong, we need to make it right. He glanced at Sophie. And also because no child should go through what your daughters went through yesterday. None. A silence fell as everyone absorbed his words. In that little apartment, something subtle was changing, a first step, perhaps, toward making amends. They earned that scholarship on merit, Sophie finally said. They're smart, dedicated. They deserve to be at that school as much as anyone else. I know, Philip agreed. And I'll make sure everyone else at the school knows it too. He stood, realizing he shouldn't overstay his welcome. May I come back tomorrow to see how their day at school went? Sophie hesitated, but nodded. Yes, you can. Philip waved gently at the twins. Be brave tomorrow. Sometimes facing our fears is the only way to overcome them. As Sophie walked him to the door, Philip made one last remark. Those dresses you made, they really are lovely. You have a rare gift, Mrs. Parker. Sophie blushed slightly, unused to compliments, especially from someone like him. Thank you, she replied simply. After Philip left, Sophie returned to the living area, where Elise and Claire were waiting with questioning looks. Does this mean we have to go to school tomorrow? Claire asked. Sophie took a deep breath. We'll see how you feel in the morning, all right? As it was, she was still unsure. Her daughters needed time to recover. The heartbreak was too raw. Meanwhile, heading down the stairs of the modest building, Philip Edwards was already making phone calls, first to his lawyer, then to the principal of St. Michael's Academy. There was a lot of work to do to fix the damage caused by his daughter, and he was determined to do it properly. The next morning, Sophie was up before her alarm. She'd spent the night thinking about Philip Edwards's visit and his promises. Part of her wanted to believe things might change, but experience had taught her not to trust pretty words from the rich too easily. The twins were still asleep when she started making breakfast. She let them rest a bit longer before confronting the decision of whether or not to go to school. The doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m., surprising Sophie. When she opened the door, there stood Philip Edwards, dressed in a neat but subdued suit. "Good morning, Mrs. Parker," he greeted. "I hope I'm not too early." Sophie straightened the apron she wore over her simple dress. "We're just getting ready for school, or trying to decide if the girls will actually go." "I see," Philip said. "May I come in? I'd like to talk before you decide." Sophie hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. The contrast between Philip and the small apartment felt even sharper in the morning light. "Are the girls still asleep?" he asked quietly. "Yes. Normally they'd be up by now, but they had a rough night." Sophie gestured to the small kitchen table. "Would you like some coffee?" "Yes, thank you," Philip said, sitting down. Sophie poured 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for herself, and took a seat across from him. "Mrs. Parker," he began, "I spent the night thinking about what happened and how to make it right. Mr. Edwards, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not sure anything can really be made right. The damage is done." Philip nodded. "Yes, the emotional damage can't be undone, but we can ensure your daughters don't suffer anymore because of this." He placed a folder on the table. "I spoke to the principal of St. Michael's last night. She'll meet me in her office this morning, before classes start. Megan will be there to formally apologize to your daughters." Sophie's eyes widened, surprised at how quickly he was acting. "I also told the principal that any child who mocks or mentions the party incident will face serious consequences," he continued. "And to make that happen, I'm making a significant donation to the school's inclusion program." Sophie frowned. "You're using your money to buy protection for my daughters?" Philip seemed genuinely taken aback by the question. "No, not at all. I'm using my influence to make sure the school takes this kind of behavior seriously. The money is just to fund programs that should already exist. He took a sip of coffee before going on. Mrs. Parker, I need to be honest with you. What happened at the party is just a symptom of a bigger problem. My daughter didn't invent that behavior by herself. She learned it. From me, from her mother, from the environment she lives in. Sophie studied his face, surprised by his honesty. I failed as a father, Philip admitted. I gave Megan everything money could buy, but I didn't teach her the values that really matter. Now your daughters are paying for my failure. Just then they heard soft footsteps. Elise and Claire appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in pajamas and rubbing their sleepy eyes. "Mommy!" Elise called, stopping when she saw Philip. "Good morning, our girls," Sophie said, opening her arms to them. The twins approached cautiously, eyeing the visitor with both curiosity and a hint of apprehension. "You remember Mr. Edwards?" Sophie asked. "He visited us yesterday." They nodded silently. Philip smiled gently. "Good morning, Elise and Claire. I was just talking to your mom about school." "We don't want to go," Claire declared immediately. "Everyone will laugh at us," Elise added. Philip shook his head. "No, they won't. I promise." He leaned in a bit, speaking directly to the twins. "Today, before classes start, Megan is going to apologize to you in front of the principal. Then she's going to apologize in front of the entire class." The twins exchanged skeptical glances. "Why?" Elise asked. "She doesn't like us." "Because she realized what she did was wrong," Philip replied. "And I won't allow my daughter to grow up thinking she can treat people like that." He opened the folder he had brought. "But that's not all. Starting today, I want to propose something different for both of you." Sophie straightened up, suddenly alert. "What exactly are you proposing?" Philip pulled out some documents. "I want to set up an educational fund for Elise and Claire. It will cover all educational expenses through college, tuition, school materials, uniforms, extracurricular activities, everything." Sophie was speechless. The twins, though they didn't fully grasp what was happening, sensed it was something important. "Mr. Edwards, this is—" Sophie shook her head, unable to finish the sentence. "It's not charity," Philip said, anticipating her thoughts. "It's justice. Your daughters deserve every opportunity money can offer, without dealing with the prejudice that comes from having fewer resources." He looked at the twins. "You're both smart and talented. Your mom told me how hard you work at school. You deserve every chance to develop your potential." Sophie still looked hesitant. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Philip took a moment before answering. "Because yesterday, when I saw what my daughter did to yours, I realized this problem goes way beyond a birthday party. It's about the kind of world we're creating, the kind of people we're raising." He sighed. "I have the resources to change that, at least for your daughters. And maybe, in the process, I can change my own daughter too." Sophie looked at Elise and Claire, who were watching the conversation with a mix of confusion and hope. "If we accept, what changes?" she asked. "Practically speaking, you won't have to worry about educational costs anymore. Your daughters can participate in all activities, get the materials they need, go on every field trip. They'll have access to tutors if they need extra help. And when the time comes, they can choose any college." Sophie bit her lip, thinking it over. "What do you expect in return?" The question took Philip by surprise. "In return?" "Yes. No one offers something like this without expecting something back." Philip shook his head. "I'm not asking for anything in return, Mrs. Parker. If you need to see it as a transaction, consider that I'm trying to fix the harm my family has caused." He glanced at the twins again. "All I ask is that you keep working hard, that you take advantage of the opportunities, and maybe, if you're willing, give Megan a second chance." Elise frowned. "She was really mean to us." "I know," Philip agreed. "And she's learning how wrong that was. People can change, especially children. But I understand if you don't want to be friends with her right now." He looked back to Sophie. "You don't have to decide right away. Think it over. My lawyer can explain everything in detail whenever you like." Sophie glanced at the clock on the wall. "School starts in an hour." "I have a meeting with the principal now," Philip said, standing. "Megan and I will be there to make a formal apology. I understand if you'd rather not send the girls today, but I assure you that when they do go back, things will be different. Sophie looked at the twins. I think we'll stay home today. They need another day. Claire and Elise looked relieved at their mother's decision. As for your offer, Sophie continued, I need time to think. It's a lot to process. Of course, he agreed. Take as much time as you need. Philip turned to the twins with a gentle expression. I hope to see you both soon at school. I promise that when you return, no one will laugh or tease you. As Philip headed for the door, Sophie noticed something different in his demeanor. It wasn't pity or guilt, but a kind of respect she rarely received from people in his social class. I'll come back later today to let you know how the meeting went, Philip said, pausing at the door. And Mrs. Parker again. I'm truly sorry for what my failures as a father caused your daughters. Sophie nodded, not quite sure what to say. Closing the door behind him, she turned back to Elise and Claire, who were watching with curious eyes. Is it true he'll pay for our school forever? Elise asked. Sophie sat on the small sofa and pulled the girls close. He offered, yes. But we need to think carefully about it. Why? Claire asked. Wouldn't it be good not to worry about money anymore? Sophie smiled at the simplicity of the question. Yes, it would. But sometimes, when we accept things from people, they might expect something in return, even if they say they don't. He seemed really sorry, Elise observed, surprising Sophie with her perceptiveness. Yes, he did, Sophie agreed. The twins were silent for a moment, each processing things in their own way. If Megan really apologizes, can we go back to school tomorrow? Claire asked at last. Sophie kissed the tops of their heads. We can, if you want to. I think I want to, Elise said, always the braver one. If she apologizes in front of everyone, maybe the other kids will stop being mean. Claire nodded, following her sister's lead. And maybe now we can go on field trips too, just like everyone else. Sophie felt a lump in her throat. It had always hurt her that she couldn't give her daughters the same opportunities other children had. We'll see what Mr. Edwards says when he comes back today, she finally replied. For now, how about we have breakfast and then look over your school books? If you're going back tomorrow, we should review your lessons. The twins agreed and went to get dressed. Sophie stayed in the living room, eyeing the folder of documents Philip had left on the table. Part of her still mistrusted such sudden generosity, but another part, the one that saw her daughters' futures, began to consider that maybe, just maybe, this could be a real opportunity for change. As the day went by, Sophie noticed the girls seemed less downcast. There was a small spark of hope in their eyes, something she hadn't seen since before the party. It was as though the mere possibility things could improve had already begun to heal their wounds. And that, Sophie thought, might be the most important thing of all. 3 days after the incident, Philip walked into Megan's room. She was sitting on her canopy bed, surrounded by expensive toys, drawing in a notebook. Her face still held traces of resentment. Megan, he said firmly, we need to talk. She looked up, then quickly returned to her drawing. I don't want to talk. Everyone's mad at me. Philip took a deep breath and sat on the edge of the bed. Do you know why they're mad? Because I was mean to those poor twins, she replied with a shrug. I already apologized at school. Isn't that enough? No, Philip said firmly. It's not enough to apologize just with words. You have to understand what you did. He took the notebook from her hands, forcing her to look at him. You humiliated 2 children who did nothing to you. 2 little girls who only wanted to be your friends. But nobody else is friends with them, Megan protested. Everyone knows they're different. They don't have nice things like us. Philip felt a pang in his chest. This was exactly the mentality he had unknowingly allowed to form. Do you think that's a reason to be cruel? That having less money makes someone less important? Megan bit her lip, starting to realize from her dad's seriousness that this was more grave than she'd thought. I just wanted my friends to like my party, she mumbled. No, Megan, you wanted to feel powerful by hurting someone weaker, Philip corrected, and that's something I can't accept from my daughter. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the immaculate garden below. You have everything, Megan, everything money can buy. But there are things far more important than that. Like what? she asked, genuinely curious. Kindness, respect, empathy. Philip turned to face her again. Do you know what empathy is? Megan shook her head no. It's the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to imagine how they feel. He knelt in front of her again. Megan, how do you think Elise and Claire felt when you and your friends laughed at them, when you told them they didn't belong at your party? The little girl was quiet for a moment, her 5-year-old eyes suddenly thoughtful. Sad, she answered finally. Really sad. Yes, Philip agreed, and not just sad, humiliated, ashamed. Like they didn't matter. Megan lowered her eyes, a small shadow of shame crossing her face. Get dressed, Philip said, standing up. We're going out. Where to? She asked, surprised by the sudden change of topic. You'll see. 30 minutes later, Philip's car pulled up in front of a simple building with a small yard. A modest sign identified it as Bright Horizons Children's Center. What is this place? Megan asked, looking out the car window. It's a shelter for children without families, Philip explained. Kids who don't have parents, or whose parents can't take care of them. Megan gazed at the building apprehensively. Why are we here? Because I want you to meet some of these kids and understand that not everyone was lucky enough to be born into a family with resources. Philip got out of the car and opened Megan's door. She hesitated, gripping her father's hand tightly. Don't be scared, he said. They're just children like you. A middle-aged woman greeted them at the entrance. Mr. Edwards, welcome. The children are excited to meet your daughter. Megan looked up at her father. They know we're coming. Yes, he replied. I called yesterday. The center has been receiving donations from my company for years, but this is my first time visiting in person. The woman led them down a corridor into a large room where about 20 children of various ages were playing. Unlike Megan's party, there were no lavish decorations, expensive toys, or designer clothes, just regular kids sharing a few toys. Kids, the woman called. This is Mr. Edwards and his daughter, Megan. They came to visit today. The children stopped what they were doing and looked at the visitors. Some smiled shyly, others just watched curiously. Hello, Philip said warmly. I hope we're not interrupting your playtime. A girl around 7 came forward. Hi, you're the man who sends Christmas presents, right? Philip smiled. Yes, my company sends gifts at Christmas. Did you like yours? She nodded enthusiastically. It was the only present I got last year. Megan looked at the girl, then at the other children, something changing in her expression. Why don't you go play with them while I talk to the director? Philip suggested to Megan. Megan hesitated, feeling uncomfortable in such an unfamiliar setting. It'll be fun, encouraged the girl who had approached. We're putting together a puzzle. Want to help? Slowly, Megan let go of her father's hand and followed the girl to a small group around a table. Philip watched her join them, her body initially tense but gradually relaxing as they welcomed her into their game. She's never spent time with kids from different backgrounds, has she? The director asked, observing. No, Philip admitted. That's my fault. While Philip discussed the shelter's needs with the director, Megan started to open up with the other children. She was shy at first, but soon she was helping them find puzzle pieces, laughing when someone struggled with a tricky corner. Where do you live? One child asked Megan. In a big house with a yard, she answered, suddenly aware of how that might sound. Cool, the boy said without envy or bitterness. I used to live in a small apartment with my mom, but now I live here. It's cool too, we have lots of friends. Megan looked at him, intrigued by how simply he accepted his situation. Don't you get sad living here? She asked softly. The boy shrugged. Sometimes, but we have food every day, a place to sleep, and the ladies who take care of us are nice. Another child approached. Do you have toys at home? Lots, Megan admitted hesitantly. That's lucky, the child said with no malice. Here we share everything. Over the next hour, Megan met several children and heard their stories. Some had never known their parents. Others had families who couldn't care for them for various reasons. All of them, without exception, seemed to treasure every little thing they had. When Philip finally called her to leave, Megan was different, quieter, more thoughtful. Can we come back another day? She asked, surprising her father. Of course, he replied. You'd like that? Megan nodded, taking one last look at the children waving goodbye. On the drive back, she stared out the car window in silence. Philip respected her reflections. Dad, she finally said, those kids have almost nothing, but they seemed happy. Yes, Philip agreed, because there are things more important than possessions, like friendship, kindness, sharing. Like Elise and Claire, Megan murmured, surprising Philip by making the connection. What do you mean? They don't have much either, but they're always together. They help each other. Philip smiled softly, seeing that the lesson was sinking in. And I was really mean to them, Megan continued, her voice trembling slightly, just because of clothes. But now I met kids who barely have clothes at all, and they're really nice. A tear rolled down her cheek. I want to apologize to them for real, she said. Not just because you told me to. Philip felt a surge of emotion. This was only the beginning, he knew. Megan's transformation would be a long process with ups and downs. But at that moment, for the first time, he saw a genuine spark of empathy in his daughter. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, he said softly. Very proud. Megan looked out the window again, her little face reflecting a mix of confusion and discovery, as if seeing the world with new eyes for the first time. The day Sophie had dreaded arrived. After 2 days at home, the twins had to return to school. The night before, she had carefully laid out their uniforms, checking every detail so they would be impeccable, giving them at least that small comfort. Elise, always braver, tried to appear confident, but her trembling hands while buttoning her school coat betrayed her nervousness. Claire made no attempt to hide her fear, keeping her eyes downcast throughout breakfast. Everything will be fine, Sophie reassured them, smoothing Claire's hair. Remember what Mr. Edwards said. Megan apologized in front of the principal and the whole class. What if nobody believes her? Claire asked softly. What if they laugh at us again? Sophie had no ready answer. She feared the same thing. The doorbell rang, surprising the little family. When Sophie opened it, she found Philip Edwards, elegantly dressed as usual. Good morning, Mrs. Parker, he greeted. I've come to accompany the girls to school today, if that's all right. Sophie blinked, taken aback. You came personally? I thought my presence might help on their first day back, he explained. Sometimes a little support can make all the difference. The twins appeared behind their mother, backpacks on. They looked at Philip with a mix of surprise and relief. Ready for a new start? He asked. Elise nodded timidly. Claire just clung to her sister's hand. I think it's a good idea, Sophie said after a moment. If it's not too much trouble for you. Not at all, Philip assured her. It's the least I can do. The short drive to the school was quiet. In the back seat of Philip's luxurious car, the twins stared out the window, each lost in thought. Sophie sat next to Philip, her eyes focused on the road ahead. When they arrived, the courtyard was crowded with children and parents. Heads turned at the sight of Philip's car pulling up. More heads turned when they saw him get out with Sophie and the twins. Let's go, Philip said calmly. Children halted their conversations to watch the small group cross the courtyard. Sophie could feel the stares, hear the whispers, but kept her head high. The principal, Ms. Beaumont, came to greet them at the entrance. Mr. Edwards, Mrs. Parker, she said with a tense smile. Elise, Claire, welcome back. The twins mumbled a barely audible greeting. I trust everything is arranged as we discussed, Philip stated, polite but firm. Yes, of course, the principal replied quickly. The teacher is waiting and, oh, here comes Megan. Megan approached, accompanied by an assistant. Her face, usually so self-assured, showed unusual timidity. When she reached the twins, she hesitated. Good morning, Megan, Philip said. Remember what we talked about? Megan nodded and stepped forward. Hi, Elise. Hi, Claire. I wanted to say again how sorry I am for what I did at the party. It was really mean. The twins looked at her warily. Elise was the first to respond. It's okay, she said simply, though her tone suggested she wasn't fully convinced. I want to be your friend, Megan went on, surprising everyone. Really? The principal smiled, pleased with what she was hearing. That's wonderful. Now shall we head to class? The bell is about to ring. Sophie knelt and hugged her daughters. Be brave, she whispered. I'll pick you up at the end of the day. Philip also said his goodbyes. Megan, remember everything we discussed? The little girl nodded seriously. I will, Dad. The three girls followed the principal into the building, leaving Sophie and Philip in the courtyard. He turned to her. I'll make sure everything goes smoothly today. I'll stay around. Sophie nodded, once again grateful for his unexpected support. In class, the twins took their usual seats together. Ms. Miller greeted them warmly, doing her best to make them feel welcome. But not everyone shared her kindness. At recess, while the children played in the schoolyard, Abby and her group approached the twins, sitting alone on a bench. Look who's back, Abby said with a smirk. The ragged princesses. Elise and Claire shrank back, their fear returning in an instant. A few kids around them giggled. You only came back because Megan's dad forced everyone to be nice to you, Abby continued. But we all know you're not like us. Elise clutched Claire's hand. Leave us alone, Abby. Why? You gonna cry again? Mocked a boy in the group. At that moment, Megan appeared. She saw what was happening from a distance and hesitated. She had always been part of that group, never its target. But something had changed inside her. Stop it, she said firmly, stepping between Abby and the twins. The whole yard seemed to freeze. Abby looked at Megan in disbelief. What? I said, stop, Megan repeated. You're being mean. Elise and Claire never did anything to you. Abby let out a nervous laugh. You can't be serious. You started this at your own party. And it was wrong, Megan replied. Really wrong. I've learned that. She turned to the twins. Do you want to come play with me? The twins exchanged hesitant looks, unsure if they could trust her. Finally, Elise nodded. Are you crazy? Abby hissed as Megan passed by. If you hang out with them, you won't be our friend anymore. Megan stopped and looked at the girl she had once considered her best friend. For a moment, the old fear of rejection surfaced. Being friends with Abby meant staying on top, being admired. But then she remembered the kids at the shelter and how they had shown kindness with no expectations. If you were really my friend, she said, her voice surprisingly calm for a 5-year-old, you wouldn't make me choose. Abby was visibly shocked. No one in her short life of privilege had ever told her no, least of all Megan, who had always followed her every lead. The other children watched in disbelief as Megan Edwards, the richest and most popular girl in school, defended the scholarship twins everyone else had shunned. Come on, Megan said to Elise and Claire, extending her hands. There's a nice spot by the swings where we can play. With some hesitation, the twins took her outstretched hands. As they walked away, they could feel the eyes of the other children on them. But for the first time, those looks weren't just mocking, they held surprise. In her office, the principal watched through the window with Philip beside her. Impressive, she commented. I never thought I'd see Megan stand up for someone like that. Philip smiled faintly. Children can surprise us when we give them a chance to do the right thing. Across the schoolyard, 3 little girls who had once lived in completely separate worlds now sat on the grass, beginning a tentative conversation. It was just a small start, Philip thought, but maybe that was enough for now. 2 weeks passed since the twins returned to school. Their small apartment now looked different. There were neatly stacked new fabrics, a modern sewing machine beside the old one, and a laptop on the work table. I still can't believe it, Sophie said, looking around her transformed workshop. It all feels like a dream. Philip smiled as he watched her examine the imported fabrics he'd helped her procure. You have a rare talent, Sophie. You just needed the right tools. After seeing her work, Philip had come up with a business plan to turn her small sewing service into a children's fashion atelier. He introduced her to important contacts and opened doors that once seemed unreachable. The first orders have already started coming in, she said, still amazed. 3 party dresses and 5 casual outfits. And that's just the beginning, Philip assured her. Once people discover your talent, you won't have enough hands to fill all the orders. At school, the twins were also blossoming. With new materials and complete uniforms, they finally felt like everyone else. Elise had been chosen to represent the class at the science fair, while Claire surprised everyone with her talent for math. Today the teacher asked me to help Victor with his math work, Claire said excitedly at dinner. She said I'm the best in the class. Sophie smiled, moved by her daughter's growing confidence. I'm so proud of you, my sweethearts. How's Megan? She asked. Is she doing all right? Elise shrugged. Abby and some of the other girls don't talk to her anymore. They say she became friends with poor kids. But she doesn't seem to mind, Claire added. She said they were never true friends to begin with. For Megan, the weeks had been tough too. The group that once followed her now shunned her. During recess, she was either alone or with the twins, but something was changing inside her. Dad, she told Philip one night while he was tucking her in, Abby said she doesn't want to be my friend because I hang out with Elise and Claire. Philip sat on the edge of the bed. How do you feel about that? Sad, but also not sad, Megan answered, brow furrowed in thought. Because she only liked me for my money and cool stuff. What about Elise and Claire? Why do you think they're your friends now? Megan paused. I guess because I was genuinely nice to them. Philip smiled, recognizing his daughter's growth. That's called real friendship, my little one, based on who you are, not on what you have. The following Saturday, for the first time, Elise and Claire were invited to play at the Edwards home. When Sophie came to pick them up in the late afternoon, she found 3 girls covered in paint, laughing while creating a colorful mural in the garden. Looks like you had fun, Sophie commented. It was the best day ever, Elise exclaimed, using an expression she'd picked up from Megan. On the way home, Sophie realized something fundamental had changed. Her daughters were no longer the shy, isolated girls they'd been before. They walked with heads high, spoke confidently, and dreamed about new possibilities. A new beginning, she thought, for all of us. 6 months had passed since the party incident. Seated in his home office, Philip Edwards pored over documents spread across his desk. They weren't business contracts or financial reports as usual, but dozens of applications for a new program he had created. The Edwards Educational Fund. Inspired by his experience with the Parker twins, Philip decided to expand his help to other children in similar situations. The program offered full scholarships to talented students from low-income families, covering not only tuition, but also uniforms, school materials, field trips, and extracurricular activities. 27 applications in the first week, he told Jean, his assistant. That's more than we expected. It shows how necessary a program like this is, Jean replied, handing him another folder. These are the historical records you requested from St. Michael's Academy. 10 years' worth of data on scholarship students and their academic performance. Philip opened the folder with interest. He had asked for these records to better understand the school's scholarship system and how to improve his own program. But what he found perplexed him. This can't be right, he muttered, frowning at the charts. Look at these numbers, Jean. Scholarship students consistently earn lower grades on extracurricular projects and oral presentations, but do exceptionally well on written tests. Jean stepped closer to see the documents. Looks like a systematic pattern. Exactly, Philip agreed. And check this out. In the last 5 years, no scholarship student was selected for regional competitions or cultural trips, even though many had the grades to qualify. Intrigued by the discrepancy, Philip dug deeper into the records. In the following weeks, he spent hours examining files, speaking discreetly with teachers and staff, until he formed a clear picture of what was happening. St. Michael's Academy, beneath its polished exterior of being an inclusive institution, maintained subtle discriminatory practices. Scholarship students rarely received recommendations for special programs. Their contributions in class were often overlooked, and their parents faced invisible barriers to participating in school activities. It's systemic, he explained to Sophie during one of their now regular coffee meetings. They had formed a habit of meeting weekly to discuss her business and the twins' progress. It's not just about kids being mean like Megan was, it's the institution itself, perpetuating inequality. Sophie sighed, not entirely surprised. I've always felt that, but I could never prove it. Whenever I asked why my girls were never chosen for anything, there was always some excuse. Well, that's going to change, Philip promised. I've scheduled a meeting with the school board. I'm prepared to use my influence and resources to push for a complete overhaul of their policies. Sophie smiled, still astonished by how much her life had changed in the past few months. Her small sewing service was now a respected atelier, with 3 employees and enough orders for months ahead. The twins were thriving at school, finally receiving the recognition they deserved, and Philip had become an unexpected but invaluable ally. "There's one more thing I discovered in my research," Philip said, his tone shifting. "Something about you, Sophie." She looked at him, confused. "About me?" Philip hesitated, gathering his courage. "I found your name in our household employee files from 7 years ago." Sophie's face went pale. That was a chapter of her life she'd tried to forget. Yes. I worked as a seamstress for your family for a few months, and you were suddenly fired, with no explanation or proper compensation." Sophie looked away. "It was a long time ago." "It was my ex-wife, wasn't it?" Philip asked gently. "Isabel was always difficult with staff. She accused me of stealing a diamond brooch," Sophie finally whispered. I would never touch her jewelry, but nobody believed me. I lost my job, my reputation. That was when I found out I was pregnant with the twins." Philip closed his eyes, guilt consuming him. He vaguely remembered the incident, but he'd let Isabel handle it while he focused on his business. "The brooch was found 2 weeks later," he said, "in the back of a drawer." "Isabel never apologized to you, did she?" Sophie shook her head. "I never knew it was found. I tried to get other jobs, but the negative references followed me. It was the hardest time of my life." Philip felt as though he'd been punched again. The link between his family and Sophie's suffering ran deeper and longer than he'd ever imagined. In a way, his negligence as an employer had contributed to the precarious situation she and her daughters had faced for years. "Sophie, He struggled to find the right words. "I'm sorry, not just for the party, but for this, too. For not investigating, for not correcting that injustice." She looked at him for a long moment. "It wasn't your fault directly, but I allowed it to happen. My inaction caused real harm to your life." He took a deep breath. "That makes me even more responsible for fixing what I can now." Meanwhile, at St. Michael's Academy, another transformation was taking place. Megan, once surrounded by an exclusive circle of wealthy children, now ate lunch at a table that included all sorts of classmates. Besides Elise and Claire, there was Lucas, the custodian's son, May, an exchange student, and Paul, a newly arrived scholarship student. "And then my mom said we could visit the shelter together next weekend," Megan explained excitedly to the group. "They need help organizing a summer festival." "Can I go too?" May asked timidly. "Of course," Megan replied enthusiastically. "The more people and the better." Across the cafeteria, Abby and her clique watched with disdain. "She's friends with all the losers now," Abby muttered to her followers. "She's lost her mind," but her words no longer held the same power. Gradually, other kids began joining Megan's diverse group, attracted by the friendly, inclusive atmosphere that contrasted sharply with Abby's exclusivity. Megan's change extended beyond friendships. Her grades improved, and especially on group projects. She actively participated in community service initiatives, and to her teachers' surprise, she often stood up for students treated unfairly. "She really has changed," Miss Miller commented to the principal during a meeting. "It's like she's a different child." 3 weeks later, the main foyer of St. Michael's Academy was decorated for a special event, the official launch of the Edwards Scholarship Program and the announcement of new inclusion policies. Parents, students, teachers, and community members packed the space. Philip, wearing an elegant but modest suit, stood on a small stage alongside the principal and school board representatives. Sophie, wearing one of her own fashion creations that reflected her new status, sat in the front row with the twins. "It is with great joy that we announce a new era for our institution," the principal declared, visibly nervous under Philip's watchful gaze. "Thanks to the generous contribution of the Edwards Foundation, we will double our scholarship offerings and implement a comprehensive support program." The applause was warm, especially from the section where scholarship families were seated. "Additionally," the principal continued, "we are thoroughly revising our assessment and participation policies to ensure that all students, regardless of socioeconomic background, have the same opportunities to grow. Philip observed the reactions in the crowd. Some affluent parents looked uncomfortable, others genuinely supportive. It was a start, he thought. When it was his turn to speak, Philip surprised everyone. "I'd like to invite my daughter, Megan, to say a few words." Little Megan, dressed simply compared to her formerly extravagant wardrobe, stepped onto the stage with a quiet confidence that no longer stemmed from arrogance, but from a new understanding of herself. "Hi," she began, her childish voice amplified by the microphone. "I wanted to talk about friendship." A hush fell over the crowd. "I used to think friends were people who were just like me, who dressed like me and had nice stuff." She paused. "I was really wrong." She found Elise and Claire in the crowd and smiled. "I learned that true friends like you for who you are, not what you have, and that you can learn amazing things from people who are different from you." A few mothers discreetly wiped away tears as a 5-year-old spoke truths many adults never grasp. "Now I have friends who teach me new things every day. Claire helps me with math. Lucas knows everything about birds. And Elise taught me how to be brave even when I'm scared." Philip watched his daughter with genuine pride, not the superficial pride he once felt when she performed to impress guests, but a deep admiration for the person she was becoming. After Megan's touching speech, Elise and Claire were called to the stage for special recognition as pioneers of the program. The twins, once so shy and insecure, walked up with confident smiles, waving at classmates who applauded them. "These girls exemplify the resilience and excellence we want to foster," Philip declared. They faced adversity with dignity and proved their worth through hard work and real talent. After the ceremony, while the guests enjoyed refreshments, Philip observed the subtle yet significant changes around him. The twins, once isolated, were now surrounded by curious, admiring classmates. Megan chatted happily with a diverse group of kids, showing no sign of her former haughtiness. Sophie approached, holding a glass of juice. "Who would have thought we'd be here after that disastrous party?" Philip smiled. "Life takes surprising turns. Sometimes we need a wake-up call to see what's right in front of us." "And what do you see now?" she asked. He looked around, at children of different backgrounds mingling, at his daughter laughing wholeheartedly, at the twins finally accepted and recognized. "I see possibility," he said, "and hope." Sophie followed his gaze. "I see it too." In that moment, witnessing the outcome of the changes they had set in motion together, they both felt the same certainty. This wasn't an ending, but the start of a much larger journey. A journey in which small acts of courage and compassion could gradually transform an entire world. Winter had arrived, blanketing the city in white. Sophie watched the snow fall outside the window of a small cafe where she had arranged to meet Philip. Their meetings, which had begun as formal discussions about the twins' education, had gradually turned into something else, more personal, more warm. The bell above the door rang, and Philip stepped inside, shaking snow off his coat. Their eyes met immediately, and a genuine smile lit up his face. "Sorry I'm late," he said, taking a seat at the table. "Traffic is crazy in this weather." "I just got here myself," Sophie replied, sliding a cup of coffee toward him. "I ordered your favorite." Philip smiled again, touched by the gesture. "You remembered?" "Hard to forget. You've been ordering the same coffee for months now." There was an easy familiarity between them, something neither would have imagined on the day they first met, when he appeared at her door after the twins' humiliation at the party. "How's the atelier going?" he asked, taking a sip of coffee. Sophie couldn't hide the proud smile that appeared. "We're swamped with orders. I just hired 2 more seamstresses last week, and we can barely keep up." "That's fantastic," Philip said, genuinely happy for her. "I never thought it would come this far," Sophie admitted. "Having my own label, clients specifically seeking out my designs, not just cheap repairs." Philip studied how she had changed over the months. It wasn't just her more polished attire, her own creations, or her new haircut. It was the confidence in her eyes, the way she carried herself like someone who finally believed she belonged. "I've been thinking about expanding," she continued, a bit hesitant to voice her ambitions. "Maybe renting a bigger space downtown." "That's a great idea," he encouraged. "Your work deserves a proper showroom." He paused, considering something. Actually, there's a place on Maple Street that might be perfect for you. It belongs to a friend of mine who's looking for a tenant who'll bring prestige to the location. Sophie frowned slightly. Philip, I appreciate it, but I don't need special favors. I can find a place on my own. He shook his head, smiling. This isn't a favor, it's a business lead. My friend wants a tenant who adds value, and your brand is on the rise. It would be mutually beneficial. Sophie relaxed a bit, still adjusting to this new dynamic where her achievements were recognized for their merit, not treated like charity. I'm still not used to it, she admitted. Used to what? Doors opening for me. People treating me as an equal. Philip set his cup down, his expression growing serious. Sophie, I want you to understand something. The world has always been unfair to talented people like you, creating invisible barriers. I'm not opening doors. I'm just helping remove obstacles that shouldn't have been there to begin with. She studied him for a moment. You've changed a lot since that day at the party. We all have, he replied softly. Maybe I changed the most. I needed a wake-up call to see the world as it really is, not through the privileged bubble I've always lived in. They fell silent for a moment, the cafe's background noise filling the space between them. The twins are excited about the school trip, Sophie said, switching topics. Philip smiled. The upcoming museum excursion was the first school field trip Elise and Claire would attend. Before Dimas, they would stay behind because Sophie couldn't afford the extra costs. They deserve these experiences, he said. By the way, I got their progress reports yesterday. The principal wanted me to see them. They're among the top of the class. They've always been brilliant, Sophie said proudly. They just needed opportunities and recognition. Exactly, Philip agreed. They needed to be truly seen. How's Megan? Sophie asked, resting her chin on her hand. Philip's face lit up at the mention of his daughter. She's changed completely. Last night, I found her sorting out her toys, separating the ones she doesn't use to donate to the shelter. On her own initiative. That's wonderful. She's developing a social awareness I never imagined she could have at this age. She asks questions that challenge me. Why do some people have so much and others so little? What can we do to help? It's like she woke up to a world outside our bubble. Sophie smiled, moved by the genuine transformation of the girl. Kids have an incredible capacity for adaptation and growth when they're given the right tools. You taught me that, Philip said, his gaze intensifying. Or rather, you and your daughters did. Sophie felt a warmth rise in her cheeks. There was something in the way he looked at her recently that stirred emotions she hadn't felt in a long time. Sophie, he began, leaning forward slightly. I know our meetings started under unusual circumstances, but he trailed off, suddenly unsure, uncommon for a man usually brimming with confidence. But, she prompted, but they've grown into something I value deeply. Your company, our conversations. He took a breath. I'd like to invite you to dinner. Just the two of us. Sophie blinked, though she wasn't entirely shocked. She had sensed the shift in their dynamic over the past weeks. Like a date? She asked directly. Yes, he admitted with a shy smile at odds with his typical business-like manner. Exactly like a date. Sophie was quiet for a moment, weighing her response. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. Philip had proven to be very different from the man she'd originally imagined. Compassionate, genuinely committed to change, and surprisingly humble in his willingness to learn and grow. But another part hesitated. Their worlds were still far apart, despite all the changes, and there were the twins to consider. I'd like that, she finally said, but let's take it slow. There's more at stake than just the two of us. Philip's smile broadened. Of course, I'll respect your pace, always. That same afternoon, at the snow-covered park near the school, Elise and Claire played with Megan and their new friends. They were building snowmen, each representing someone in their group. Mine looks crooked, Claire lamented, eyeing her tilted snowman. That's okay, Lucas said, the custodian's son who had befriended them. It's more interesting that way, it has character. Claire smiled, grateful for his kind comment. Feeling accepted, even with imperfections, was still a novel experience for her. Not far away, Elise was helping May, an exchange student, put a scarf on her snowman. They chatted enthusiastically about a book both were reading. "I never knew the library had such cool books," Elise said. "I didn't used to go there." "Why not?" asked Maze, curious. Elise shrugged. "I thought it wasn't for me, that the librarians would look at me funny or something." Megan, placing stones as eyes on her own snowman, overheard and joined the conversation. "It's weird, isn't it?" she said thoughtfully. "How sometimes we feel like we can't go places, even if no one directly says so." "Yeah," Elise agreed, surprised by Megan's perceptive comment. "Exactly. I used to feel that way about the library too," admitted Lucas. "I thought it was only for kids who already had lots of books at home. And I thought only people like Abby could do ballet," Claire added, chiming in. "But now you're starting ballet, aren't you?" Megan asked. Claire nodded, her face lighting up. "I start next week. I'm nervous, but Mom said I can just try it and see if I like it." "You'll like it," Megan said cheerfully. "I can show you some steps I learned if you want." "You still do ballet?" Elise asked, surprised. "Yeah, but now I go to a different studio with Mrs. Casey. She's really nice, doesn't talk about who has the best shoes or who goes to the fanciest shows." Paul, a new scholarship student who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "Do you think I could try out for the soccer team? I always wanted to play." "Absolutely," Megan replied immediately. "My dad says the school has new rules now. Anyone can try out for the teams and clubs." "Even if I don't have the right gear?" Paul asked, glancing at his worn sneakers. "The school has equipment to lend," Elise explained. "Mr. Edwards donated it." Paul smiled for the first time since arriving 3 weeks ago. "Then I guess I'll give it a shot." The children kept working on their snowmen, discussing their hopes and plans. To any passerby, it was just a group of kids playing on a winter day, but for them, it represented a profound shift, unseen barriers crumbling and new worlds of possibility opening up. When Sophie arrived to pick up the twins, she found them rosy-cheeked from the cold but bright-eyed with happiness. On the drive home, the girls couldn't stop talking about their plans for the next day, helping Lucas with a science project, the Mandarin words May was teaching them, and the upcoming volunteer day at the shelter Megan had organized. "I both seem really happy," Sophie commented, watching them in the rearview mirror. "We are," Elise confirmed wholeheartedly. "What makes you so happy now?" Sophie asked, genuinely curious. The twins exchanged a look, that special twin look that said they were thinking the same thing. "We have real friends," Claire answered after a moment. "And we get to do things at school we never did before," Elise added, "like using the library and going on field trips. And no one looks at us weird anymore," Claire continued, "or laughs at our uniform." Sophie felt a pang in her chest. She knew her daughters had suffered, but only now was she fully grasping how excluded they'd felt. "You know," Sophie said thoughtfully, "when Philip showed up at our door that day, I thought he just wanted to clear his conscience." "Wasn't he?" Elise asked. "Maybe at first, but I think we found something much more important than money along the way." "What?" Claire asked, curious. Sophie thought for a moment. "Respect. Belonging. The chance to be seen for who we really are. Like when the teacher picked me for the math competition," Claire said. "She said I've always been good, but no one noticed before." "Exactly," Sophie agreed. "Money helped open doors, but what truly made a difference was changing how people look at us. And how we look at ourselves," Elise added with wisdom beyond her years. Sophie felt a wave of pride. Her daughters were not only surviving but thriving, and they had extracted lessons from hardship that many adults never learn. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Sophie sat in her small home office, going over sketches for her new clothing line. A major department store had offered to stock her children's line at several branches, and she was preparing her proposal. Her phone lit up with a message from Philip, suggesting a restaurant for their upcoming dinner. Sophie read the text slowly, reflecting on how much her life had changed in so little time. From a struggling single mom desperately trying to keep her daughters in a school that marginalized them, to a rising designer whose work was being recognized in the right circles, from someone who avoided wealthy parents out of fear of humiliation, to a woman about to go on a romantic date with one of the most influential men in the city. But the most important changes were internal, her renewed pride in her work, her growing self-confidence, and the certainty that her daughters now had a clear path to developing their talents. Sophie replied to Philip's message with a simple, "I'm looking forward to it," surprised by how true that felt. At his mansion, Philip also reflected on the changes in his life, watching Megan sleep. Over the last few months, he had radically rearranged his priorities. He cut back his office hours, delegated responsibilities he once insisted on handling himself, and spent far more time with his daughter and his new social initiatives. On the small nightstand beside Megan's bed sat a handcrafted storybook Sophie had made for her. A simple gift, but created with such care and detail that it had become the girl's favorite. The story was about a princess who discovered that her true magic wasn't in her riches, but in her ability to see and value the people around her. Philip flipped through it gently, admiring the meticulous work and the subtle message. Sophie had a talent for conveying important truths in an accessible way, both in her designs and her stories. His phone lit up with Sophie's reply. He felt warmth spread in his chest as he read her words. There was something special about her, a sincerity, a quiet strength, a wisdom forged through hardships he'd never had to face. Megan stirred in her sleep, murmuring something. Philip gently tucked the blanket around her, thinking about how much his daughter had changed. From the arrogant, insensitive child who'd humiliated the twins, she had grown into a thoughtful, empathetic little girl who now asked deep questions about the world. "Dad," Megan mumbled, opening her eyes drowsily. "Shh, go back to sleep," Philip whispered, stroking her hair. "It's late." "I wanted to ask something," she insisted, rubbing her eyes. "What is it, sweetheart? You like Miss Sophie, don't you? Like, really like her?" Philip nearly choked at her directness. "Why do you ask?" "Because you smile different when you talk to her," Megan answered simply. "And you fix your hair before you see her." Philip couldn't help but laugh. "You're very observant for a 5-year-old. "Almost 6, she corrected. "And you still didn't answer." "Yes," he finally admitted. "I like Sophie very much." "That's good," Megan mumbled, her eyes already closing again. "She makes you nicer." Philip stayed by her bed until he was certain she was deeply asleep again. His daughter's simple comment echoed in his mind, "She makes you nicer." There was a deep truth in that childlike observation. Sophie hadn't just helped him see the world differently. She had also helped him rediscover parts of himself that had been buried under years of single-minded focus on business success. His empathy, his desire to truly connect with others, his longing to make a difference. All these things had re-emerged through this unexpected bond. The next day, Philip visited the school for a meeting of the newly formed diversity council he'd helped establish. In the hallway, he ran into Elise and Claire carrying books to the library. "Mr. Philip!" Claire exclaimed, running to hug him. They'd started calling him Mr. Philip naturally a few weeks ago, and he was surprised by how much he loved that small sign of affection and trust. "Hello, my little scholars," he greeted, kneeling to their level. "How are you today?" "Great," Elise answered. "Miss Miller chose me to represent the class in the writing contest, and I'm helping organize the library," Claire added proudly. "The librarian said I'm really good at sorting systems." Philip smiled, genuinely delighted for them. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of both of you." "Are you really going to have dinner with Mommy?" Elise asked suddenly. Philip blinked in surprise. "She told you?" "Of course," Claire said as though it were obvious. "Mum tells us everything." "We're a team," Philip smiled, enjoying their healthy family dynamic. "Yes, we're having dinner next week." The twins exchanged knowing looks. "What?" he asked, amused. "Nothing," Elise replied with a mischievous grin. "Mommy acts different when she talks about you." "Different how?" Philip couldn't help but be curious. "She smiles more," Claire explained. "And she fixes her hair," Philip laughed, recalling Megan's similar comment the night before. "Well, that's good, right?" he asked. "Very good," Elise replied seriously. "Mommy deserves to be happy." Philip felt a lump in his throat. The maturity and generosity of these children, after all they'd been through, was truly inspiring. "She does, indeed," he agreed. "And you both deserve all the happiness in the world." As the girls said their goodbyes and continued on to the library, Philip watched them with a sensation he could not fully name. Perhaps it was hope, or gratitude, or the sense that he had discovered a new definition of wealth, one based not on material possessions, but on genuine connections, personal growth, and the chance to make a real difference in others' lives. Heading to his meeting, Philip felt a growing certainty. Whatever path his relationship with Sophie took, one thing was clear. All of them, he, Sophie, Megan, Elise, and Claire, had found something far more valuable than money on this unexpected journey. They had found a new way to see the world and themselves. And that, Philip reflected, was true wealth.